So I interned with Amsted Rail. They're a Chicago-based rail firm, as Jerry said. And to get an idea of how I developed my idea of their strategy, we first need to look at the history of European rail. So if you remember from your history classes, World War II was a big deal. All the countries in Europe invaded each other, and they actually prepared for this. In their rail systems, they set up individual national systems which were incompatible with their rivals. So when Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union, they were unable to use the Soviet rail system, which was great for the Soviets because it meant that Germans couldn't get their food, their tanks, and their oil to the front lines. This is great in wartime, but it is terrible in peacetime. Because in peacetime, it realistically means that every country has one national rail system, which is a monopoly, which isn't exactly good for competition. And even now, in the 21st century, most of Europe's long-distance freight rail and passenger rail is controlled by big national corporations, which were privatized but are still monopolies. So you can see France, Spain, Germany are nearly 100% controlled by what are formerly national firms. And this is a problem for the rail industry because it makes it uncompetitive. If you see in the top right corner, rail only makes 11% of freight transport as compared to almost 50%, which is controlled by the truck drivers. So based on this information that the European freight rail isn't very good, the EU has been making big initiatives called the Shift to Rail initiative to invest more in their freight rail system. As you see on this map over here, Western Europe and Eastern Europe combined outspend North America, South America, Asia, and Russia in rail. So Europe is pouring millions and billions of dollars into their rail infrastructure. And this is for a lot of reasons. The first is for the economic integration of the EU. As we talked about earlier, in World War II, the problem was that the countries were not economically integrated. So by building continental railways, they hope that every country in the EU will be too dependent on each other to fight each other. And the second reason that they want to build more rail is for climate change purposes. Trucks are 3 to 4 times more carbon using than trains are for every ton mile. So trains are far more efficient in that regard. So if the EU wants to be economically integrated or wants to meet their climate goals, then they need freight rail, which is why they're spending so much money on pursuing that. So if we are Amsted Rail, we're an American-based firm, why would we buy out a European rail manufacturer when we have all these factories in America? Why would we take billions of dollars and invest it into buying European factories and paying European employees? Well, the main reason is because of the international standards. Basically, it means that all of Amsted's products that are based in America don't really work in Europe. And the only way we'd be able to sell in Europe is if we were to make a new UIC prototype, build European factories of our own, and then we'd have to jump through all the regulations of getting our products approved. That would take decades, billions of dollars of time, which frankly isn't really that worth it. So if we buy out European manufacturers by acquiring them, then we get into the market, we have a set customer base, and Amsted Rail has the financial capital to expand out production. So this leads on very well to the strategy that I've developed for Amsted. Don't take this as what Amsted's actually going to do. This is just my personal thoughts on the matter. So the ideal acquisition target would be a company that is small enough, less than 25 million euros in revenue. So they're easy to buy, or at least relatively cheap to buy, but they have good technical know-how and specifically are along the lines of EU's new innovations that they're backing. Because the EU is trying to economically integrate the region. So they're making standards, they're pouring money into different investment initiatives. We want to ride the currents, so to speak. And that means being on EU lines, buying a small company that we can expand out, because Amsted has the capital to expand production of a small factory. We don't have the technical know-how to produce UIC components, which is what we're buying. So we want emphasis on technical know-how. And these 3 companies are firms that I've looked at and that I've decided are pretty solid buys. ADS Technology is a French pneumatic brakes production factory. They make pneumatic brakes, that's about it. And that's exactly what we're going for. We want to get a small niche of the market, like pneumatic brakes, that we can buy in, expand out, and take over Europe. Yeah. And Reloc is along the same lines. They modernize, they're a Romanian-based factory that tries to modernize old diesel locomotives into new electrical ones, which fit with the EU's climate goals. Thank you.